We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for showing up, everyone, to our town hall for the month of July. We've been having these every month, just talk about different issues that are of importance and not necessarily important to Democrats, important to Missourians. Tonight we're going to be talking about the tariffs that we've had for basically since the start of 2017, and how they've affected not only Missouri and our industries, but the nation as a whole and actually the global economy just a little bit. Since Missouri's number one industry is still going to be agriculture, we've got J.C. Owsley. He is a local farmer and proponent of small family farms, so really interested in hearing what he has to say. So, J.C.
Can you hear me? That's good. I won't have to stand up and yell. You know, agriculture is my strong suit, I think. I know a little dab about some other things, but I've grown up in that field. And as I was driving, my wife Kay was driving me down. I get so keyed up before these events that I'm not safe out on the road, so I have to have a designated driver because I get really crazy. But I was just thinking about something that Jack Kennedy said. Jack Kennedy was the first president I ever voted for when I was finally old enough to vote. But Jack Kennedy said farmers are the only category of people who buy everything at retail and sell everything at wholesale and pay the freight both ways. I think I quoted him pretty straight on that. And you know, as I look at this situation we're in right now in agriculture, we've been hit harder than many other sectors for so many reasons. Because in addition to the uncertainty that has come with these violations of trade agreements that we've had with other countries and arrived at over a long deliberative process, forging relationships over time, we've seen these other countries lose confidence in us as a reliable supplier, as a party that keeps its word in trade agreements. And you know, dealing with other folks, no matter what sector of business we're in, whether it's in agriculture or used cars, confidence, a handshake goes a long way. And we've destroyed that. One of the things that's happened too in agriculture is we've had such uncertainty in what is going to happen that it's difficult to plan. And with the ag tariffs, we saw the value of soybeans drop substantially. We saw corn drop substantially when we lost a big part of our world market. For me as a cattle producer, that doesn't hurt me nearly as bad as what happened, though. Back in 2016, the Congress previous to this one destroyed country of origin labeling. And country of origin labeling with meat products required, finally after years of fighting, and consumers had demanded it for a long time, finally required that we label these commodities with the country of origin, where they came from. They had to be grown and processed here. And you see, using a kind of a flimsy excuse, the previous Congress basically destroyed country of origin labeling. The cattle that I own today are worth half what they were 4 years ago. My asset values just went in half with the reduction in values of cattle. But you know what? The week that country of origin labeling was destroyed, the cattle market started downhill rapidly. And within 3 months, it had bottomed out. You didn't see a bit of difference at the retail level, though. At the grocery store, hamburger was still the same price. Steaks were the same price. You didn't see that. The value was captured at the packer level. The feedlot operators took it. They got beat all to thunder. But those packers owned those cattle 3 days, and they were suddenly making $300 a head for owning them 3 days on top of what they got for their processing. A wild wreck. And how any cattleman could even support the Missouri Cattlemen's Association and the NCBA today is just beyond belief. Because I honestly believe that our checkoff dollars that we've paid to promote beef and to do research on beef products and use have been diverted illegally to other purposes. And we have a lawsuit that finally got to court. It's being heard now. RCAF USA, a group out of the Northern Plains, is the lead plaintiff in that. One of the groups that I pay dues to, the Organization for Competitive Markets, is also a party in that. And basically what we're doing is we're showing that the packers and the commodity traders actually were manipulating the prices of cattle artificially and stealing what we'd worked hard for months to produce. And in a period of 3 days, they were making a killing from it. So these factors are very real. They're painful to us if we're out here. And we're seeing agriculture just go through a horrible period of time. And the tariff is just part of this. But in recent years, the industrialization of agriculture has been aided and abetted by state and national governments. Family farms have pretty well, they've declined substantially. I was in Wright County the other night with a group to speak to them, and I thought that Wright County at one time, not long ago, was the #1 dairy county in Missouri. By the number of dairy farms, by the number of milk cows, it's still one of the top dairy counties in Missouri, but they've only got about 35 dairies in a county that once had 300. You know, Greene County took that same hit. All of southwest Missouri was big because we had constant corporate mergers. I think the cooperative DFA was actually working against the best interest of its membership as it was growing. High-priced grain from that freedom to farm policy that one of the farm bills back promoted grain. You know, corn was $7. That kills a lot of dairymen when your feed costs are higher than the value of your milk. So we saw the Southwest Missouri used to produce a lot of feeder pigs, but we've seen that industry industrialized into a polluting, concentrated, vertically integrated sort of a structure. Right now, the state of Missouri has aided and abetted the growth of that, and reducing, with a recent Senate bill that the governor just signed into law this week, that reduces the ability of local governments to pass health ordinances. Right here in Springfield and Greene County, a lot of your water, when you get in a bind for water, comes out of Stockton Lake. Right around Stockton Lake watershed, there's some huge concentrated poultry operations. And that stuff is not nutritious to drink. When we get a 4.5-inch rain like we had at my house a couple of nights ago, that stuff goes downhill. You know, I'm very thankful that here in Greene and Christian County both, when we fought so hard against this freedom to farm amendment or right to farm amendment to the Missouri Constitution, you folks had the good sense to vote it down here and down in Christian County. But yet, people up in my county voted overwhelmingly for that bit of garbage that gives the Chinese carte blanche to take over our hog industry. I think 2 out of every 3 pork chops now may be a Chinese pork chop. The packing industry is run by a bunch of Brazilians. It's not a pretty sight. The impact on consumers is not good. On farmers, their input cost with the concentration and the mergers of the input suppliers are paying more than they ever have for tractors and fertilizer and chemicals. I like to think of those chemicals anymore as poisons more than that's actually what a lot of them are. not really good for your health. But we really live in some tough times, and there are serious health issues involved, and folks are just rolling over and voting for state legislators who support this kind of garbage. It's so frustrating. I'm not sure how to. When Skylar asked me to come down here, I didn't have a lot of lead time, and I've been out in the hayfield putting up bales of hay. So I haven't had time to sit down and get all my numbers together. So I'm just speaking from my standpoint of personal experience. And I do have a lot of notes. I did read Darvin Bentley's op-ed that was in the Joplin newspaper just last week. Marvelous piece. I recommend it to you to read. There are some real family farmers who are very opposed to the industrialization and the corporate takeover. In my community, up on the Hickory County, Benton County line, land that Charlie Cowden once owned, it's owned by an out-of-state oil company that owns racetracks and things of that sort. There will be no more families farming that ground. There will be no children going to school from those farms. There will be no owners of that land who have an interest in the school boards, in building the local infrastructure. Communities go to pot. Rural communities go to pot, whether it's a Chinese corporation or a large industrial concern that has taken up all the land in a community, and they take all the profits that they make somewhere else. They don't spend it back in that community. So these are a lot of the things that are at play. And I've already told you, I'm getting a little bit wild and rammy here. I think I need to get focused. You get me back on track here before I get really wild. We'll do a two-man tag team here.
They don't pay me enough to get you back on track. So what kind of questions do you guys have? Obviously, originally we planned on this being a tariff conversation, and we had some other panelists. He wasn't able to show up, so we really have a good panel on, or a good source for agriculture in Missouri and how it is changing with, where it used to be a very family community focus, and that's changing. So, does anyone have any questions for JC? Lene, you're trying to come up with something.
What I'm thinking about is not the tariff, but the EPA and how they're gutting the EPA and what's going to happen to our clean water.
Was everyone able
these
to hear that?
environmental issues are so important to those of us on family farms. And it's so sad that so many of these folks who are getting beat up on the price of their cattle are blaming their loss of income on environmental regulations. The damn fools don't know that the messaging machine for a number of years has sort of blamed government regulations. One of those organizations that's a culprit in that is a Republican insurance company called Farm Bureau. It masquerades as a farm organization, but quite frankly, I do not believe it speaks for Missouri farmers. But that organization and the Missouri Cattlemen's Association, the Missouri Pork Association, all lobbied really heavily for this horrible amendment called Right to Farm that limits our ability not to regulate family farms, but the corporate polluters. And if you want to see real good examples of that, you go up in North Missouri in Putnam County. North Central Missouri was in a depression in the 1980s, worse than they've ever seen, and a lot of that land traded hands, and Smithfield ended up with it. Smithfield was a large pork corporation that came out of North Carolina originally. Smithfield ended up with that, and they had a deal to trade it off to the Chinese here a few years ago, just ahead of this Right to Farm constitutional amendment that squeaked by with less than 1% here in Missouri. And those people had a deal cooking with this Chinese corporation, which the Chinese government is a major shareholder in, to sell. And that damn legislature in Missouri raised the number of acres that foreign entities could own, because Missouri had legislatively dealt with that kind of thing previously and had put some upper limits to try to protect family farms. You know, we have a few legislators who have their heads on straight, but unfortunately they're in a minority. You know, the 24 that have sense are so outnumbered up there. They fought a good game. They fought wonderful defense, but you know, it's pretty damned hard when you can't get on the floor, you know. And we have probably, you know, we've got an unelected bunch in charge of the state of Missouri right now. We have a governor who was not elected to be governor. We have a lieutenant governor who was not elected to be a lieutenant governor. You know, these people basically have been the governor. I hate to use the term, I call him the accidental governor, has basically done the bidding of the industrial ag sector. This is scary because I hope Missourians will recognize that we need to take our state back for the sake of our communities, for the sake of our public health, for our drinking water. You know, once your drinking water is gone, you're in pretty damn deep trouble. I don't want to buy it all in bottles. Anyway, ma'am, you have a question back there.
I'd like to know, what are the farmers groups doing to educate the public?
Well, it's a pretty large struggle because the organizations that I belong to, the Missouri Farmers Union. One of the notable members of that organization is Wes Schumeyer. Wes works hard at educating the public, and several other members of that group do. Wes has been down here a number of times, but you know what? We were promoting a farmer's Bill of Rights. And hell, Wes Schumeyer and I both went around for a year with targets on our back. The Missouri Cattlemen's Association, you know, basically painted a target. I had a target on me at the same time. You know, it just, they want to discredit anybody who disagrees. And so sadly, these cattlemen are so damn brainwashed by the messaging media, by the corporate messaging machine, that they don't think for themselves. That every bit of growth there is in an industrial model, there's less room for them as family farmers.
Well, the reason I ask is because some of the stuff that you talked about, I mean, I would have no knowledge of, because I haven't been exposed to it. Maybe I haven't been reading the right media sources, but I would think that if voters in the state of Missouri were more aware of what the people they have elected are supporting, you know, which is basically the destruction of farming as we've known it.
Well, you know, even with our own party, I've had my share of frustration with that. I think I was probably responsible with the former chair of the Rural Caucus getting in the position she got in. And I felt ashamed of myself afterward because when we did this, we rolled out this Farmer's Bill of Rights, she threw one hell of a hissy fit. And, you know, it was just unconscionable. Hell, she's the treasurer of our state party today. So, you know, we've got to do a lot of educating of ourselves. I was trying to get on my iPhone. I took screenshots of some articles, though, today. Darvin Bentledge, who is very active in with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. He's a farmer. He's a real farmer. He's a serious farmer. He's been at it a long time. He writes some lovely stuff. He's brilliant. But he had a wonderful op-ed. It was in the. Let me do some things here.
Okay. Well, yeah, we've got a couple questions.
Play a couple of tunes.
Yes, sir.
You said that the price of your beef was half of what it was some years back. Is that what you said?
All right.
Your assets for your beef was half of what it was.
Let me give you an example.
Well, I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is, what I'm asking is, how has tariffs hurt you?
I don't hear very well.
How has tariffs affected the price of your beef?
I'm talking about all these other factors that have come into play. The tariff just makes this whole thing even worse. The price of these cattle dropping goes back to this destroying the country of origin label. Now, And when that happened, we were having imported beef. All this imported beef that comes in and gets labeled product at USA competes against the value of those cull cows and bulls that I get rid of that go into hamburger. And instead of bringing 80 or 90 cents a pound, they're bringing 45. You know, good butcher and bulls are bringing about $80 today. You know, good bulls ought to be bringing $1.20. You know, go in the hamburger market. But
So you're saying,
the value of this old cow, I was talking to the chairman of the Greene County Democratic Committee just yesterday, and his daughter had bought some cows for $1,800 a head 4 years ago. And same cows today, if you take them to the sale barn and sell them as second or third period cows, ready to have calves here in September, these cows still won't bring over 800 or 900. They've lost 1,000 apiece on them. The calves that I used to sell 4 years ago would bring 1,200, will bring 5 or 6 right now. So that affected my bottom line.
So-
The tariff is just a contributing factor.
I was going to say, is the U.S. government imposing tariffs on your beef, or are they imposing tariffs on
It's a
beef
trade.
coming in?
Tariffs are costing us on the input side, the things we have to buy.
And then,
Like grain?
and then China is placing tariffs on our beef, and so our beef doesn't sell as much in China because of the tariffs. So it's affecting the output and as well as the input.
These are very complex issues, and it's hard to just give you one quick answer and say, yes, 2 + 2 is 4. Because there are a lot of dimensions and complexities that come into play here.
I guess another little piece of this complicated problem is the price of everything you buy and handle that is composed of metal, because all that's going to go up and has a higher tariff than some other things.
You bet. Guess what tractors are made out of?
All of that's made out of metal.
Well, and you see, the sad thing about this, these things were done almost just as a knee-jerk reaction, rather than as an overall planned strategy. You know, tariffs have been used as punishment. They have been used as international policy kinds of tools. You know, we'll throw a tariff on you if you don't stop those folks who are refugees from Honduras that are crossing your country coming into ours, to exercise rights that are guaranteed by the Geneva Convention, which was
So that one got
completed in
stopped.
World War II.
Okay, so what he's talking about there is the administration had threatened to throw on more tariffs to Mexico even after negotiating NAFTA 2.0. He hates it when he calls that. If Mexico did not do more to stop illegal immigration in the United States. Mexico came up with this, well, we'll do this thing that we already promised you we would. And then the administration said, oh, okay, that's wonderful. We won't put more tariffs on the land. And, yeah, which is par for the course. Jeff, you had a question?
I wanted to make a comment. Yesterday's Wall Street Journal has a story about cotton farmers in Arkansas and Missouri. The price of cotton is down 30% to the farmers since China put a retaliatory 25% tariff last year. So.
Okay. And I'm going to interrupt. Oh.
Asked your question a lot more, answered your question more directly than I did. He had the benefit of information.
That's never stopped anybody in politics.
You can rely on people like Jeff, and he should be in the state legislature.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt just real quick. The Senate or the House Minority Leader Crystal Quade is here, and rather than make her sit through the entire thing, if she's got other plans, because she's got her daughter here, who's bored out of her mind, we will let Crystal give a real quick update on what's going on with the legislature, and then we'll get back onto the farming. Thank you very much for showing up.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So real quick on this topic, the one bill that we talked about this legislative session, and I will preface with apologies if Alex is running around me. She's a little bashful at these things. So we did have one bill this year dealing with CAFOs, and I definitely will be the first to say I am not an expert on this topic. But I can tell you that one of the things the legislature did this year, and think about how JC was talking about all of these issues we've continuously had for farmers, and we just keep piling stuff on. And there was a bill this year that makes it so previously in the state of Missouri, local municipalities, county elected officials like county commissioners or county health departments would create their own regulations when it came to CAFOs, how far away they have to be from residential properties, water quality regulations. And we have about 20 counties in the state of Missouri who have their own ordinances that they have locally voted on to protect their groundwater and their land. And this year, the Missouri legislature decided that that didn't matter anymore, and that the local municipalities could not further restrict than what the state of Missouri did around any CAFOs. So now we have these 20 counties who have protected themselves from the CAFOs that are in their regions who now can't. And if you look at where these factory farms are located, place those on a map directly over the counties that have these regulations, you will see exactly why the legislature wanted to get rid of this. And so they completely wiped local control away from our local entities when it came to factory farms. And you couple that with all these things that JC's talking about, and it still is very difficult for me that we continue to let the other side say that they're the ones who are for family farmers, because they're not. And they're not for local control. And this is yet another example of that. Real quick, Matthew asked me to come in and give you a legislative update. As you all know, session is out. We have not been in session since May, but there still are a lot of things happening. Traditionally, I get a couple weeks off and get some downtime, and that's not been the case this summer, but in some good ways too. But I wanted to give you all an update and an opportunity to ask some questions about some of the things that are happening. So first and foremost, House Bill 126, better known as the abortion ban bill, was passed out of the legislature, making Missouri one of probably the most restrictive state now in the union for reproductive health care. It is an 8-week ban, and if Roe versus Wade is overturned, then effectively makes abortion completely illegal and will make it so even the morning after pill is also illegal in the state of Missouri. So that bill, as you all probably are aware, was signed into law by the governor, and immediately folks went into action. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood filed lawsuits against the Secretary of State. There are all sorts of things happening, but currently we are trying to get it on the ballot. We are trying to have a referendum to bring this to a vote of the people so the people can decide. Now, I left out a big part of that bill is also that there are no exceptions for rape or incest. So I can tell you that since session has been over, I've been hearing from folks on both sides of the political aisle calling my office who are very upset. And either they're upset with the overall bill, the lack of respect for women in the state of Missouri, but I have a lot of folks who are upset about that rape and incest piece too. And I'll have folks call and say, I'm a Republican, but this doesn't reflect my values. And so people are upset. So they're trying to get it on the ballot for a referendum, and the Secretary of State was holding it up. First, he said we couldn't at all because there was an emergency clause on the bill. Now, to get in the weeds for a moment, the emergency clause is a fancy thing that legislators like to do to make a bill go into effect immediately upon the governor's signature. All legislation becomes law on August 28th of that year, but if the governor signs it, then it becomes, with an emergency clause, it's immediately law. We have a definition in the Constitution of what is an emergency. It's for things like when the Joplin tornado happened and we needed to get money quickly to different state agencies, that's an emergency. And we do pass a lot of legislation with emergency clauses on it. Well, they put an emergency clause on this bill for the provision that is what we refer to as two-parent notification. So if a minor wants to get an abortion in the state of Missouri, they have to contact both parents, even if one of those parents happens to be a rapist and cause that pregnancy. And they put an emergency clause on that to make that become law immediately. So according to the Secretary of State, because of that, then we couldn't have a referendum and bring this to a vote of the people. So then ACLU sued and said, no, you're wrong, and they won that piece in court. So the courts have told him, you've got to give them ballot language so that they can collect signatures to then get this on the ballot. Unfortunately, they also said that they're not going to get involved with the timeline of this. And so legally, he has until August 14th to release the ballot language to ACLU. We have until August 28th to gather the signatures to put it on the ballot. It's not possible. If he waits until August 14th, it is not possible to gather 100,000 signatures from the congressional districts that we need to get this on the ballot. So we are, at this point, ACLU is really pushing folks to call the Secretary of State, ask for that language now, because if we get it, in the next couple days, it's feasible. And they are putting steps in place so that when we get the ballot language, we have folks trained, we have notaries all over the state, and we're ready to go the moment that happens. But we also need to be realistic in this fight. If he waits until the 14th, it's not possible. So then what do we do? Well, the obvious first step is we register voters and we change the legislature. That is first and foremost what has to be done. This bill will be fought in the courts, and it will take a while to become implemented, even if the courts give the go-ahead. But in the meantime, we're going to have the most restrictive legislature in the country who is willing to pass this legislation. And so I know folks like ACLU are going to pivot their energies to voter registration and making sure that folks turn out for Election Day. So that's the abortion bill. Does anyone have any questions about that or where we are? Yeah.
What is the last day realistically that you think you could get the 100,000 votes that we could go to?
Yeah, I don't want to give a date. ACLU has not given a date, but I think realistically 2.5 weeks or more, and that is really pushing it. I mean, you've got to remember, right to work, we had 1.5 years, and we got triple the signatures we needed, and that's important because you'll have wrong signatures. We need to validate everything. So to even get it done today would be hard. And so they are working to prep as much as they can, but if we don't get it in the next couple of days, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, yeah, Jeff.
Do you know what the name would be, the name we would hear on the street, in other words, for the petition, what would be called?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
The name, the name of the petition. The name of the petition.
No, we have wait on the Secretary of State's language before we see that. There is a political action committee that's been formed by ACLU that is collecting donations to help with this effort, and it's called Stop the Bans. And so there's Facebook pages and all the social media. So that entity is a collaboration of Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and ACLU, and they are all raising money together as a coordinated effort to make this, to see what can be done around this issue.
Are you going to talk about medical care funding that's
Yes, yeah, the Medicaid funding, yeah. That was going to be the next topic that we go to. Yeah. Okay, if no other questions on that, I'll move to, if you have seen lately, I've been causing some ruckus in the news, and that's been very intentional. Back in April of this year, we learned that we had a lot more families being kicked off of Medicaid than normal. So a little back knowledge for you all. When you receive Medicaid, you're supposed to do yearly reauthorizations to prove that you still qualify based on income. Now, Medicaid is a program that folks do pay for or they don't pay for. It depends on their income. There's premiums. It's handled like a lot of other insurances. So every year, you're required to turn in paperwork to the state and reauthorize and reprove that you still qualify. So back in April, we started to get numbers, seeing that the amount of families leaving Medicaid every month were way higher than they have been historically. And so we started asking some questions. Lots of entities started asking questions. I had the director of Medicaid, Todd Richardson, come to my office, and I said, hey, we are hearing of thousands of children, about 10,000 children a month being kicked off Medicaid. What's going on? And he said, we're looking into it, and these are the array of things that I've been told since April, and I'm not going to have them all in order. But first was, the state of Missouri was not complying with federal guidelines on how we reauthorize, okay? So we weren't doing it as often as we were supposed to. Some folks were not being reauthorized for a very long time. And so we got a new computer program called MEDES, it's M-E-D-E-S, it's an acronym for a program that has been being built for many years, and we've spent about $60 million on it so far, that is supposed to be a redoing of our technology systems for Medicaid. And he said that part of this system, with complying with the federal regulations, we had to send out a whole bunch of reauthorizations, more than we normally do. So they utilized this computer software to send letters to people. And these letters said, hey, you need to turn in all of this paperwork in 10 days or you lose your Medicaid. And so my response to that is, okay, who are the families that received this letter? Who are we talking about here? How many letters have you sent? And they couldn't give me a number. And they couldn't tell me who the families were. They said, well, it's just part of the computer system. Then a later meeting, we learned, well, there was a glitch in the system. I was literally told that there was a glitch in the system. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? We don't totally know, but we're looking into it. Well, I then start to get contacted by lots of different people. I had a constituent call my office and provide me copies of 4 different letters that she received on the same day. One letter said, give us your paperwork in 10 days. One letter said, you've lost your Medicaid completely. One letter was about her son's Medicaid, and the other one was something else from the Department of Social Services, all in one day. That 10-day time period was 3 days from the day that she received it in the mail. And so she didn't know what to do. She's like, do I turn this paper in or have I already lost it? I don't know what's going on. So she calls the wait center, and she was on hold for 4 hours and got kicked off. And part of my discussion with the director was about these call centers, and they 100% acknowledge that this is a problem and happening. No one is denying that the call center thing is happening. So we continue to go on, and there are things like the economy is getting better. Well, yes, it is. But if you look at the percentage of people who are no longer getting Medicaid, that same percentage drop is not the same for food stamps. It's not the same for TANF or any of the other services that folks receive. We're not seeing that same drop in people. Now, those aren't the same people always. We recognize that. But any economist would tell you that those percentages would look similar, and they don't. So we've continued to ask questions. We've sent letters. We've had numerous meetings with lots of different people. I had a professor from WashU who's an economist come and talk to us to try to figure out what is going on and why are these families losing Medicaid. And I was told in early summer that the numbers were going to slow down. Like, look, we think we figured it out. We think it's this computer system. It's been a full year since we've implemented it. It should stop. Well, then the next month, we had another 9,000 kids. So at that point, that's when I sent a letter to the speaker last week asking for an investigation through the House. We have a duty to be oversight of the other branches of government. And so I have asked the speaker to call a hearing so that we can actually dig in on this more than all these random meetings that we're having, but actually have these folks sit down and tell us what is happening. So right now, what you can do is call the speaker's office and ask for an investigation into this. What you can do is, if you know folks who have gone through something, who are losing their Medicaid, who are trying to get back on it, have them call my office. We are helping people contact Medicaid directly so they don't have to sit and wait on the phone for 5 hours at a time. But we're also collecting stories. A lot of the media has been doing a great job this week of trying to bring this to light, trying to find families who are affected by this. So the news leader, I actually shared on my Facebook page today, is asking for folks to call so that they can actually talk to them about what's going on. I've had nurses reach out to me. I shared on Facebook today a nurse reaching out about clients that she has, patients that she has that are in chemo and not working. They can't work. And so it's not the income for everybody. It might be for some of these people, but we know specifically people who literally are not working and they're still losing Medicaid when they should have it because they're disabled, right? So what is going on? And so that's what's up with Medicaid right now. There are a lot of other things happening, but that is the fight right now around Medicaid and making sure that the folks who qualify, we didn't change the qualifications. We didn't make it harder to get Medicaid. It's the same. We are just making it harder in a bureaucratic mess. Do you guys have questions about that at all? Yeah. I have not gotten an official response. I did get an email yesterday that goes to everyone. Anytime he allows a committee to meet in the interim when we're not in session, we get a letter. And there was one for the health committee Now, he didn't say that this was the task that they were tasked for. That is one of the many committees this could go to. I actually asked for it to go to the Government Oversight Committee because I feel like this is an oversight issue. But I'll be happy with any committee to look into it, to be honest with you. So I did receive that, but I also received one on the Criminal Justice Committee and a few other committees. So I don't know if that is going to be used for that. I hope so, but we'll see. Jeff, yeah?
So Todd Richardson is paid $250,000 a year. Do you think he's qualified for that job? If he was appointed by Mike Parsons?
I do. No, I do. And I appreciate that question, and I will always be honest with you guys about this. Todd Richardson is the new director of Medicaid, but he's also the former Speaker of the House. I have my own opinions about people getting appointments and things happening, but I will tell you this. Of all the Republicans I work with, Todd Richardson has probably the most respect from me out of anyone else. Todd was very good to work with, very accessible, and a very smart man. And when we've had these conversations, he does have some good ideas about ways to fix the call center and big scale plans for the department, which I appreciate, but we're not having any conversations about the immediate right now. And that's my problem, and I have told the director that as well. Qualified, I don't know his resume totally. I know that he is very competent and that he will listen. So there's that.
I just wanted everybody to know how much.
Yes. Yeah, he makes a lot of money, and yes, he does. And from someone who's not from the medical world, he's not a social worker, he's not from that background, but he did serve in the legislature for a long time and was speaker, so he does have some knowledge of the functionality of it. But yes, there are many, many, many people who are randomly appointed to things within government, and sometimes that can be a detriment. Yeah.
Has the governor spoken to you or made statements that he's going to get to the bottom of this or anything?
No, I have not heard anything. And so part of why the letter became public was because I hadn't heard anything from anybody. You know, every one of us get a report every month of these numbers. We get lots of reports every month, but this is one that we all receive, and nobody was talking about it. And you know, I had a few meetings throughout session, and a couple other legislators had asked for the director to come and talk to them, and there are 5 or 6 of us who pay attention to this issue who were like, what's going on? But that's not enough, not when we're talking about 100,000 children. And so that's why I made this public, because I want the governor to respond to this. There's no way they didn't know this is happening, and so we need to have attention around this issue so we actually find out what's going on. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, those are the 2 big things right now that are kind of action items, so to speak, that we're working on. Important for you to know as well that the Special Committee on Criminal Justice is meeting around the state right now to have further discussions on what hopefully next year we will get done. We did get a lot of criminal justice reform done this year, not as much as I was hoping, but we did get some good things done, some bipartisan things around that. And so that committee is traveling the state. They don't have anything scheduled for Springfield yet, but when they do, I'll make sure and spread the word on that, because we want input from folks of what you would like to see in the criminal justice realm. Another thing, Skylar asked me to talk briefly about next year and what I foresee happening. At this point, I think the biggest concern for those of you in this room that you would want to know about is Clean Missouri. You know, Clean Missouri was a topic of conversation this past year, but nothing crossed the finish line. There are various versions of the bill to undo Clean. It will have to go back to a vote of the people if they touch the bulk of it, and it will be probably dubbed as like Cleaner Missouri. You'll see some things in there that we like, better lobbyist reform. You'll see some things that you know, the general public is in favor of, but the crux of it all will be to get rid of the nonpartisan demographer and bring it back to letting the elected officials choose the districts. So that's going to be a really hot topic this year. You know, I like to say that, you know, politicians are smart and strategic. We are always campaigning, and in my brain, there was a lot of strategy behind doing abortion this year, so far out from an election, and doing Clean Missouri next year, so far out from the past election. And you know how quickly voters' minds are moving because there's so much happening every single day. And so Clean Missouri coming through next year, it's far enough away from the passage of it that the narrative can be changed. So it's up to us to be very vigilant in making sure that we are still having the conversation around vote of the people, what the people want, knowing the percentages of how it passed by, is that 62% in the state of Missouri, knowing what the voters in legislative districts wanted. Here in Greene County, every district went for Clean Missouri. So we need to stay on top of that one because it will come from a lot of different angles and it'll be really pretty. And it'll be something that folks want to get behind because that's the way it's going to have to get done. But we need to pay close attention to the language and make sure it doesn't undo the very important redistricting piece that we all supported. So, yeah.
Because I thought gerrymandering had a real setback because of the Supreme Court. So can we even put it in there?
So it is in our Constitution now. So Clean Missouri is in our Constitution. And so are you saying that could we do it again? Is that what you're asking?
The Supreme Court just not rule on gerrymandering?
It ruled on specific, it ruled on specific cases. Now, if someone wants to challenge our current Constitution,
It will not affect our
not right now, no. If somebody wanted to challenge it and took our whole Constitution to court and after that, then potentially yes. But right now, where it stands, it's not affecting it. Yeah.
I remember back during the school year when I was doing a journalism piece about what Jeff Steve was up to. I interviewed a guy named Travis Fitzwater who was passing a bill to make the state house smaller and also have like a nonpartisan demographic. I wasn't sure if that passed or not, but if it did, like how would that be affected by?
It did not pass. It did not pass. So there were a few different bills this year changing the size of the House. Our legislature is the fourth largest in the country. And by significant margins. And so every year there are conversations around changing the size of our districts and lessening the amount of members that we have. Folks on both sides of the aisle support and don't support it. It's really not a partisan thing. That's been very interesting. But that's an example of there will be bills potentially that end up being a vehicle for something to undo Clean Missouri. And that one could have been because there were other provisions in that bill. And I don't want to speak to the provisions of his bill because I'm not 100% familiar with it because there were so many. But that is a great example of most likely how this will get done. Yeah.
I have a question about hospitals in Missouri, specifically rural access hospitals and closing and the effect of Medicaid, Medicaid expansion on those. Is there anything in the legislature to save some of these or bail them out or whatever rather than having other entities out of state and purchase them?
Okay, what do you need? Do you want to say hi? Okay, so to answer your short question of is there anything in the legislature right now? No, there's not. There have been some bills that expand access of, say, where our nurses can practice without a partner doctor, like we have mileage limitations, and we got some stuff done last year around that. I am somebody that supports access and however we can get it, and so those were measures that I supported. When it comes to the specific hospitals and the closures that we've had, we're not seeing much behind that because it has to do with Medicaid reimbursement and Medicaid expansion, which are things that the Republican legislature does not want to have conversations about. So right now, you may have seen in the news, and Mercy talked about it a little bit, the reimbursement rates that our hospitals have been receiving for Medicaid are lower than what they are used to. And there have been cutbacks on various things, and it's, I don't want to get in the weeds of that, but essentially, you have a broken arm, let's say it costs $100 in Magic Land, because it would never cost that little. But say it's $100, your insurance will cover 95% of it, Medicaid will cover 75% of it. And so we see these providers put in a situation where if they want to accept Medicaid clients, they're getting reimbursed at a lesser amount than what normal insurance will do. And so they're having to eat that cost. Well, in rural Missouri, where majority of the patients are on Medicaid, we see a lot of these hospitals just can't afford it, and so they're shutting their doors. We had a hospital in the Boot Heel close this past year that, I kid you not, 4 years ago, the director was in Jefferson City testifying in favor of Medicaid expansion because he said if we don't have expansion, our hospital will close. And so to that point, there are petitions here. We are trying to get Medicaid expansion on the ballot because the legislature is refusing to have that conversation. Yeah.
One of Rex Sinkfield's groups is out talking around the state about calling for a new Missouri Constitution, a convention to rewrite the Constitution. Are you hearing much about that?
Not much. So the convention of the state, so every, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, it's in the Constitution. Every so many years there is the ability to have a convention where we then pull apart the Constitution and decide what we want to do about it. You can look up online, it's very easy to find the process for if we were to do that. There are actual elections for representatives from each district to go, I think it's by senatorial district, to be the liaison for that district to then have the conversation about the Constitution. To answer your question, Jeff, I have not heard a lot of conversation around it. Obviously, he's got a lot of money, and if it's something that he's pushing for, we'll probably see it. But I have not heard anything about it yet, which is kind of surprising. Yeah.
It's embarrassment to me that Missouri has come to the forefront in this bill that was passed about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a very strict bill. It's embarrassment that us, to me as a taxpayer, is this a political thing that's going on? Are there really enough people in Missouri who are pro-life that they can push this agenda? Or is it strictly political?
Yes and no. So first I will say that in terms of are there enough people in the state of Missouri who believe this, the answer is no. And I can tell you that because I have seen lots and lots and lots of polling around this issue. As a pro-choice candidate, it's something that I am, and it's a personal, belief of mine. It's something I pay close attention to. Depending on how you word the question, of course, changes it. But brass tacks, do you believe that Roe versus Wade should be overturned? 75% of Missourians say no. That's a huge number. And then when you have the conversation about do you support cases of rape or incest to have access to abortion? Overwhelmingly, folks say yes. It's in the 60s. And that is both Republican and Democrats across the state of Missouri. But obviously, folks supported this bill as well, overwhelmingly in the legislature. And they represent their districts, and they do continue to get reelected. So the piece where I say yes to the political is because this was an orchestrated effort. You can see the similar versions of the bill in multiple states across the whole country. And so it was orchestrated, it was strategic, and very well done. Our bill specifically was drafted in a way that when we go to court over it, that it's gonna be hard to defeat it. They spent a lot of time and energy in making sure what they were doing would lead to the Supreme Court having a conversation about Roe again. So yeah, it's scary, to be honest with you. But I do believe that the voters are on our side.
I probably want one of these to have the Supreme Court do nothing.
Yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, depending on which news article you read and which legislator you interview, some of them in the beginning of session said, yes, I want this bill to be the one. Then that messaging changed over time, and they're like, no, that's not why we're doing this. But a couple of the representatives actually said, yes, that's why we're doing this. So, do y'all have, another question?
Is it true that religion could be the elephant in the room?
I mean, sure, yeah. But I will say that too, though, what I do want to echo with that is we've seen a lot of opposition to this bill from the faith community too. We've seen, and all different faiths, which has been very interesting. The Jewish Federation had a public comment about it. We've seen organizations say this is too much, and even Catholic entities have come out against it, particularly because of the rape and incest piece. So yes, I'm sure for a lot of the electeds a lot of them even spoke on the floor to that, of this is why I'm supportive of this, but I do think that there is a unique balance around this too. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we're going to get out of here because she's obviously bored.
Thanks again, Crystal, and thanks for your work in Jefferson City. Okay, anybody have any more questions for JC, or did you find the article that you were looking for?
Yeah, I found so many, though, it would be another 2 hours, and we're going to break up in 30 minutes.
Okay.
But we start and stop meetings on time around here, don't we?
Absolutely, we are.
I will say one thing, though, about tariffs. Just remember and share this with your friends and neighbors. A tariff does not punish anyone except the consumer. The consumer pays for that tariff. It will not. We're not punishing the Chinese. Hell, if we were punishing the Chinese, this is a strange thing. The Trump organization has just gotten a whole bunch of new patents and copyrights and so forth over in China. They're doing a great deal of business there. I'm not sure. I can't figure out all the nonsensical confusion that's being generated around. It overwhelms me. But the tariff is going to hurt more than anyone else that low-income family, the median-income family. Rex Sinkfeld will not suffer a damn bit, nor will David Humphreys down here. His shingle-making empire will take good care of him. The people who will suffer will be those of us here in this room and our less fortunate neighbors. And it's certainly inhumane to even permit this kind of stuff to go forward without fighting it pretty hard. I've told you more than I know and understand, yes.
And I've forgotten more than I knew about. This is from half a century ago. But anyway, I remember we had a Republican, Dr. Karsh at the University of Missouri. Oh no, it was Pinckney Walker, who's a professor there, and he was talking about the benefits of countries mutually lowering tariffs. And he's a Republican.
Republicans have traditionally been in favor of free trade.
And this is what's weird. Yeah, he talked about the Hawley-Schmoot. I guess I remember.
Yeah, the Hawley-Schmoot tariff.
Tariff was the highest they had, yeah. And now what damage it did. Now I remember in the '60s talking about all the countries. Like you lower yours and I'll lower mine because we can grow soybeans better than you, and we can make yeah.
Yep, and that's the basics of free trade. Absolutely.
Anyway, I don't know what happened to all that.
I do. Don, you had a question too?
Sir, if I may go off topic, is there much discussion in the farm community or amongst the farm organizations about long-term climate change?
About what?
Long-term climate change?
You know, there's a great deal of denial in some of those groups. One organization that I pay dues to, the Missouri National Farmers Union, is certainly aware of and constantly campaigning on the importance of our recognizing the challenges that climate change is going to force us to face. The president of the Missouri Farmers, past president for many years of Missouri Farmers Union, Richard Oswald, farms up in the Missouri River bottom up in northwest Missouri. He's still got 800 acres of his land that will never be farmed again. The Missouri River got higher than it has in his lifetime, and Richard is about 69. The house that he was born in had never been underwater. It was in the second bottom off of Highway 29. You can almost see it up there north of St. Joe when you get up toward Craig, toward that big ethanol plant. And that house in the 95 flood, it got up to the farmstead, but not in the house, up into the house about 6 feet. And didn't go down for a long time. He knows the severity of that because he's suffered from it. He's seen it. And farmers in the Missouri River Basin are very much aware of it. But on the other hand, there's this anti-science mania here in this country, this unwillingness to accept the reality that perhaps man-made climate change is real, that we contribute to these factors that have caused extremes in weather, that have caused extreme heat in Alaska last week, record highs. These are not just mere happenstance. But the denial comes from, you remember when the tobacco companies were fighting against the fact that lung cancer was caused by smoking? The oil companies and the coal people have been fighting against climate change, even being discussed. That the Secretary of Agriculture, Purdue, to destroy that group of scientists in USDA, has moved that whole damn operation to Kansas City and gave those people 60 days to make a decision. Some of the top scientists in USDA. And part of it is to squash this scientific community, silence them, and to shut down that part of USDA that was always called the People's Department of Agriculture, the farmer's friend. But there's the damn coal companies and energy companies fighting solar, not because it's good for our country or it's because it defeats its greed. Absolutely and greed, just like the tobacco companies. Hell, I smoked like a chimney for years. I finally figured out 25 years ago they weren't beneficial. When I was a college kid, they were giving us cigarettes on the campus of Central Missouri State College. We walked on there as little green freshmen, and we'd been having to pay 17 cents a pack for them. At home, we were getting free cigarettes. They wanted to get us hooked. And I learned to enjoy red Wednesdays. I went through 2 packs a day, and there was evidence in those years that it wasn't beneficial to our health. But scientific studies were suppressed. And the same damn thing is happening with climate change information. Now, the farmers who are directly affected right in those river bottoms and some of those areas are catching on pretty damn quick. But the farm organizations that allegedly represent them, the Farm Bureau particularly, represents other interests. The Missouri Farm Bureau and the American Farm Bureau Federation is no way a spokesperson for the good of agriculture. And these communities down in the coastal areas of the United States that are going to have to rebuild someday are very well aware of the effects of climate change. Our military has contingency plans that they've been working on for years. They're seeing this as a national threat. And the military, the Pentagon folks have been working on this. I mean, there is awareness, but in the media, which is owned and manipulated, talk about manipulation. I read Animal Farm in 1984. Hell, I'm living it today. You know, I read these as a college kid, but the messaging machine has done so much. We're so damn stupid. We watch Fox News and we don't question anything. We don't, and our news media is the days of Walter Cronkite are long past. You know, it's hard to have that level of confidence in Huntley and Brinkley having a conversation on the evening news. But we have suppressed knowledge and information because smart people may not be voting for this power structure that we have here in Missouri and that we have in the nation. I'm sorry, but I get very passionate about this, and sometimes I hit on a note that sounds a little bit reasonable, but I feel this so sincerely and so passionately that sometimes I get really a little bit wild. I've thought about getting me some snakes and holding a revival meeting and maybe passing. I could go out here and had a couple of buddies in college. They said they were a couple of con guys, but They said they were down in South Louisiana one time, and they ran out of money, and their car broke down, and so they borrowed a tent and set it up and had a revival meeting, and made all those people feel guilty about whatever they were doing every day, and got them to put enough money in baskets that they fixed their car and got home with a lot of money left over. So you can do that. Adolf Hitler learned to do it, and even there's an orange idiot in the White House that does some of that. And he lacks the oratorical skills that Hitler had. I don't know. It's the dumbing down of America. Honey Boo Boo has finally prevailed. I never saw it, never watched an episode, but
Sure you didn't.
That's what we're seeing, that we have. Thomas Jefferson said, a nation that expects to be educated and free expects what never was nor ever will be. And here in Missouri, we have a state legislature that constantly is battling against public education. They're battling against the retirement program that Missouri school teachers and administrators have paid into, and one that was managed during hard economic times so it still performed well. And yet these people are there's every session of the legislature, somebody makes a run when it gets their hand in their retirement. It's not tax money, hell, it's money those teachers and the school districts matched it, and they're paying a big chunk. When I taught school years ago, we paid in like 4% or something like that. But these people pay in big bucks. But you know, there is an attack on education. Having a Secretary of Education in Washington who absolutely battles against public education, and hell, the woman is dumber than a box of rocks. You know, I don't believe she couldn't. This is sad stuff. A damn Secretary of Agriculture who comes from the industrial sector of agriculture, who suppresses these poultry farmers. They're making slave wages, and they've got the risk of owning all these buildings, you know, and they'll turn the contractors to. Well, it's a bad deal. These guys are serfs out here, and yet they have no recourse. We're destroying the Packers and Stockyards Act. That was set, I mean, my God, these things go back to the reform years, the Muckraker era, Teddy Roosevelt, and we began to do some things right in this country. And we're going to have to do it again, people. We've got that all to fight over again, and the damage that we do when we do finally prevail is going to take us years to work out. This is not going to be as sadly, you know, I didn't really have a firm assignment. Schuyler gave me carte blanche to come down here, and he said, well, we're going to talk about something about tariffs, but you'll be a member of the panel, and we just want you to talk about agriculture. But I got on the floor tonight. I'm the only guy here except the moderator, and I'm tired, and I'm just so tickled that you folks are being kind and attentive and humoring me, sit here and listen to this. But you know, I was a history teacher for a few years. I started out. I couldn't last too many years teaching. I remember those lessons, and I'm so thankful that once in a while I run into one of my former students at gathering, and they will make some comment about something you still remember, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a feeling of pride. But I think part of it is I'm used in entertainment more than I taught them, but sometimes if you keep them used in entertainment, they're going to listen to you all the time. But no, we've got a lot of fights, and you know, we had a hell of a mess economically with the deficits during the Bush years. Bill Clinton began to make some progress and turn things around, and it went to pot. We made huge progress under Barack Obama. All but one of his 8 years, we're making progress on the deficit, and folks wouldn't let that happen. That's a black man. He's not supposed to be smart. Hell, he's the smartest president we've had in my lifetime, and we've had some damn good ones. But, I mean, he's a brilliant man. But I see so much racism. The Civil War ain't over with. We have got so much to have to heal up from. Some of us won't be around when it's all over and all up. But I think we will prevail. We'll come out of it. This country has come through some hard times, but this is one of the worst we've been. I'll tell you what, we've got 20 minutes. If anybody wants to take a shot at me, I'll accept it.
This is a little bit off of the tariffs, but I just want to ask you, different persons is farmer. you know, he portrays himself as one of us, the farm boy.
Yeah.
Is he for the farmer?
Is what?
Parsons, does he support the farm community? He's a farmer. That's what he campaigns on. Or is
I don't think he understands, though. The farmers that hell, he grew up right in the same county I did.
And that's what he is going to follow.
A few miles west. Yeah, but you know, that's one of the most ignorant damn counties in Missouri. My God, for years, the greatest asset we had to boast of out of Hickory County was Sally Rand.
There you go.
I mean, we had great pride in the fact that Sally Rand was from Wheatland, Missouri. And you know what? Sally Rand was a marvelous entertainer. She was a fan dancer. I'll guarantee you the Accidental Joe couldn't entertain anybody like he did. All I know, I've never gone to one of the events that he's been on the program.
That's what he's going to campaign on.
I refuse to, but I've had friends who've been there, and they've thought all he does is parrot the lines that the Missouri Farm Bureau hands him, that an organization called Protect the Harvest. Protect, oh, doesn't that sound like a wonderful thing? We want to protect the harvest. But that's one of those front groups for basically the Chinese, the right to farm.
That's right.
The Horace Lucas Oil Company funds a lot of that. And we've got a fence about a mile between the two of us we have to deal with sometimes. Cattle get mixed back. Fortunately, he has some good employees. And, but, you know, the money that's made by these outside entities, it doesn't get spent back there in the local community. They bulldoze them houses down on them houses, farmers when they buy them. Because you know where most of your real estate tax comes, it's on your residence or on a business structure. Ag land, I hate to say it, but it's badly underassessed. You know, the east 80 of our place, the taxes are $32. The part where our house is substantially greater. You know, it's a couple thousand there. But that 80 acres that has no buildings on it, I think it's $32. That includes the library district, the health department, road and bridge, Hickory County R1 school, all those little categories. Ag land is, and you know, in the 80s when those farms were cheap and people were going broke, people with a lot of money could buy them up. And if we had surplus tax money that they were keeping instead of paying in, you know, tax cuts enabled the super rich to gobble up more. I see it every damn day. Yes.
You know, as an aside to that, there are people who own property within the city limits of Springfield and still zoned agricultural. We're talking property over here on the James River Expressway.
Yes.
So all around it is commercial development, but their tract might be agricultural, and they're sort of paying no tax to speak of when it's really not agricultural.
It's development property. Well, up in Boone County, we've got the same thing. My goodness, his son-in-law is one of the closest. But he owns a chunk of land there right around hell, he grew up in Oldham.
Laurie? Is it Bill Laurie, or is it the other?
No.
He owns the Colorado.
Doesn't make a difference. Names aren't important, but anyway, he and Eddie Scott works on a lot of development property here. And they let somebody bail the hay off of it rather than pay someone to bush hog it, but they're paying ag taxes. And it's in Columbia City. Same thing you all face here. Ma'am?
Protect the harvest. You said that was started by the Lucas Oil.
They're a big funder of Protect the Harvest.
And where does the money go? Does it all go to politicians?
It goes to buy legislators and a lot of messaging. Protect the Harvest does a lot of television. You know, they want to shape our minds that somewhere or another, bigger is better in agriculture, and you'll get your food cheaper if it's done by mega corporations. You know, in economics, we learned about various structures. Perfect competition. Ag was always one we referred to. No producer can affect the supply or demand for a product. You know, then we got the oligopoly, but the monopoly can just about do what they want. And you know, this is what we would have ultimately if all the land drifts into the hands of the Chinese and other wealthy investors.
Guess how high your food shopping is. Food security is not well served. Well, anyway, it was fun coming down here, but I've told you a lot more than I do, and I'll get wound up again. We'll stay overtime. I don't like that.
JC, thank you very much. It was entertaining as well as very informative. Next month, Crystal kind of touched on Medicaid expansion. Next month, right here, it'll be the fourth Wednesday of August. We will be talking about Medicaid expansion and how it will affect Missouri and hopefully how it will protect some of our rural hospitals. Because as well as pretty much everything else, economic development is not going to happen in a county that does not have a hospital. So please look forward to seeing you then, and thank you very much for coming out tonight, folks.